Hi everyone, and welcome to the channel. Today, we are going to be continuing reviewing all the archetypes based on their pure variant builds. Last time, we did At and A, and now we're going to do B. Starting off straight away, we have Bacterian Empire Ship, or BES for short. To be quite honest, this archetype isn't really that great. Let me explain. When I first read this archetype's playstyle and how it functions, I was pretty excited. However, in practice, it works as well as a paper boat on a river stream. So this deck is basically based off of boss rushes in video games where its monsters are the bosses. All the monsters share the effect that when summoned, they gain 3 counters. And when they attack, they lose a counter. If they run out of counters, they kind of explode. Overall, this deck is really easy to interrupt, and half the time you don't need to do anything because the opponent will most likely brick. What is bricking, you may ask? Well, to brick is just slang for when you have a bad hand, and where you can only make a bad play or can't do anything at all. Back to BES. This deck has battle protection, but it's very limited. It has no interaction during your opponent's turn, but does offer some floating capabilities. What is floating, you may ask? In simple terms, it is when a monster card replaces itself when it leaves the field. So, again, this deck, while it has an interesting concept, kinda needs more support to be actually viable, and kinda sucks when playing. Next up, Battery Man. Yeah, this deck is not that great either. To be honest, nothing really stands out too much for this archetype, as it just summons monsters and wants to get a big attack using AA and AAA, and then just attacks. Also, this deck really does brick, and also has really poor protection. When trying this archetype out, I gave up trying to pull off a win, as it bricked even against Element Sabers. Other than that, no protection once again, and its final inboard is not so great. So, again, pretty bad. Next up, we have... How do a wasp get in here? Oh shit, that wasp has a gun! Battle Wasps is an okay archetype. It's a bit of a guilty pleasure for me, because I, for some reason, really like their synchro monsters. Unfortunately, the archetype lacks monsters that are useful, but when the archetype pops off, they can be fun. They can unfortunately have little to no protection outside of the battle phase, and furthermore, can be pretty inconsistent. Its mechanic is also not that unique, as it just aims to synchro monsters and lower your opponent's attack, and then end them. So yeah, nice archetype, but needs more support. Battling Boxer is quite boring and pretty straightforward. The archetype is based on battling the opponent using big Xyz monsters. But unfortunately, the archetype is just underwhelming and can quite honestly be defeated with attack higher than 2600, which again isn't too high. Its end board isn't too powerful, and again, outside the battle phase, it has little to no protection. So yeah, not that great. Although it does have some good floating capabilities, it also has some stealing capabilities, but again, this deck is just not that overall impressive. Wow, the archetypes in this category have been a little underwhelming, but let's hope it's... the hell? It's that wasp again. Oh shit, it brought a bee. Oh no, the bee has a... Bee Troopers is an interesting archetype. Its main focus is swarming the field and to get large monsters on the field. These monsters can be quite formidable, especially the turn they are summoned, as they aren't affected by card effects until the end of the next turn. And again, these monsters have pretty big attack numbers. This deck doesn't really pose much interruption to your opponent, and at times can be pretty consistent. So, while its big boss monsters can be daunting, again, it isn't impossible to play against. Ah yes, Blackluster Soldier. This archetype mainly surrounds the monster of the same name, Blackluster Soldier, and its variation. When using its spell cards, its monster can be pretty formidable, as it has practically 5 effects. Well, 4. Those are Banish, Attack Again, Burn Damage, and Banish from the hand, which is pretty cool. And by spell card, I just mean its ritual spell card, which makes summoning the monster much more easier, and the monsters used to summon it gives it its amazing effects. So, to summarize it quickly, what is a ritual monster? Well, a ritual monster is just that, a ritual monster, which you place in the main deck. To summon these monsters, you need to either summon them through tributing, through a ritual spell, or through other means. And often, when ritual summoning these, you'll need the spell card as well. Sometimes, the monster can only be summoned using a specific ritual spell. So again, Blackluster's boss monster, which it has many of, can be quite daunting. Also, this archetype when played pure suffers from some consistency issues and often lacks protection. The archetype also doesn't have many searches you can play on your turn 1, so can be quite slow. Also, it doesn't really interfere with your opponent's play during their turn, so taking all of that into account, this deck is pretty decent. Okay, now to continue. To be quite honest, I'm just glad there's no more bees or what. Black Wings is an archetype that focuses on swarming the field with monsters and synchro summoning some strong monsters. This deck has some powerful cards. One, for instance, which can banish all your monsters if you just attack. I both hate and love this archetype, but again, if you fail to normal summon a monster, it's stopped dead in its tracks. It's not difficult to stop this deck, but it also isn't always easy to stop it. So yeah, make of that what you will. Also, the monsters of this archetype lack some form of protection, but this archetype can easily power through it. Also, just to mention, this archetype has been receiving a ton of support over the years and can be slightly oppressive to your opponent. Next up, Blue Eyes. Dear God, this archetype will not die. This archetype somehow gets more support than some third world countries. I understand that the archetype belongs to the OG rival of Yugioh. Blue Eyes has an archetype with a pretty basic strategy of getting its big dragon monsters out on the field and destroying your opponent with them. Over the years, they have been receiving more and more support. This support gave major consistency boosts to the deck and even some more powerful monsters. Furthermore, they have also received a boost to their power, have some more protection, and also some negation capabilities. This archetype, even with all the support, is still not too bad to stop, but wow, they can be quite annoying. So not bad, just annoying, and very, very simplistic. Oh yes, on a side note, if you are interested in playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Or learning how to play it, this deck is pretty good for beginners. It's very basic, very easy to understand, and is still quite strong. But anyway, back to the list. Next up, Bujin. Bujin is made up of a mix of Beast and Beast Warrior monsters, where the Beast monsters offer effects by being banished from the graveyard, while you control the Bujin monster, and the Beast Warriors give more drawing power. So this deck, while it has tons of cards, is still pretty meh, often needing more than one turn to set up the board, unless you have this bad boy. But then again, they can only do so much. The Xyz and Link monsters do provide some interesting effects, but these effects aren't that great. One just allows you to draw more cards, and the other just helps to send monsters to the graveyard. At most you can get 3 big monsters, but that is under very specific conditions. Personally, this deck isn't too difficult to play around, as you often have little to no protection, and don't have too much interaction during your turn. So, while it may have an okay mechanic, it's just okay. Ah yes, the Burning Abyss, or Ohio. This archetype is okay, I don't really see the hype around it, but I do like its playstyle. The monsters of this archetype can easily swarm the field, unless you have something besides Burning Abyss, in which case, they'll just explode. Its extra deck monsters do offer some pretty powerful milling effects that can hit your opponent during their turn, and can disrupt your opponent's plays. This deck can be quite dangerous, but has little protection from what I can see. So while this deck is pretty consistent, its protection is its downfall. Ah yes, Buster Blader, the perfect answer to people who hate dragon type decks. This archetype absolutely destroys dragons. If you're playing Blue Eyes, then watch out buddy, you are screwed. This archetype aims to summon its boss monster, Buster Blader, the Dragon Destroyer Swordsman. Or, as I like to call him, the purple one. Because when this bad boy is out, not only does he negate all dragons, he also changes them to defense position. But wait, he also gains 500 attack for each dragon on the field, or is in their graveyard. Furthermore, it also deals piercing damage. And that's not all. With its synchro monster, it turns all your monsters to dragon type. So yeah, get bent, buddy. Its support cards also protect from numerous types of cards, however, the deck suffers from consistency. Also, outside of this, the archetype lacks protection from spells and traps, or from monsters that just aren't dragons. So, if I were to describe this, I would just say it's Ally of Justice, but done better. So, besides all of that, I think this archetype is pretty fun and pretty cool, but again, to look at it realistically, is just decent. Next up, Butter Spy. There's not really much to say about this, it just aims to take advantage of changing your opponent's monsters to defense position or attack position and gaining advantage through that. But otherwise, nothing too special about this archetype, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. And that is B. So if I were to put it into a final ranking, this is what the current tier list would look like. Thank you all for watching the video, and join me next time for when we go over C. But hopefully I'll see you in the next one. So for now, get out of here.